Guys, this will be the last video. You as well as I are very relieved about that. And we left off with Reagan and Reagan's economic policy. Every president since really, I'm trying to think, probably since FDR, you have two big parts to look at. You have domestically what he does in the country and foreign affairs. And definitely now, in the last 30, 40 years, there are two parts to every presidency. What you do domestically, you don't always have control over. What happens in foreign affairs, definitely you don't have control over, but you do have choices in how to respond. So we left off with Reagan, who is still wildly popular because of Reaganomics, because of his economic policy. He cut taxes. But when you cut taxes, very difficult to raise spending. And as we saw with Reagan, in his second term, he had to raise taxes because there were enormous budget deficits. The country was going bankrupt, basically. Foreign affairs, a mixed record. With Russia, some very positive things. With Central America, some very negative things. And then caught up in Beirut, in Lebanon, which, again, is not something that he had control over, but we pulled out of Beirut. Poor George Bush comes into office promising, read my lips, no new taxes. He raised taxes to try and solve the budget deficit, and he is stuck with a one-term presidency. Bill Clinton runs against George Bush in 1992. Clinton serves for 2 terms. And Clinton's campaign motto, which he had, big, huge sign, this is slide 50, by the way, big, huge sign in the back of his campaign headquarters, "It's the economy, stupid," which is a really good campaign slogan. He was a moderate. Clinton was very successful because he is a middle-of-the-road president. He had a very conservative team of advisors, including a Republican financial advisor, Alan Greenspan. And he also is blessed with the fact that we have no big, huge conflicts overseas. We are no longer fighting Russia. We no longer have a Cold War. The Soviet Union has disintegrated. And that leaves a huge surplus of money that you don't have to spend on defense. We still don't disband defense, but we don't have to spend as much as we did. This is a fact. You can Google it. It is not the Republicans who reduced the national debt and created a budget surplus. It was a Democratic president, Bill Clinton. In his second term, he had a budget surplus. This is the last time we have balanced the U.S. federal budget. It was under a Democrat, Bill Clinton, not under a Republican. Bill Clinton also, during his term, created 20 million new jobs. So Democrats are not necessarily bad for business. It depends. Excuse me. Economically, look at the next slide, 51. 1993, after he takes office, Clinton raised taxes. This is how he balanced the deficit. He raised taxes slightly above what they were when Reagan was in office. The top 2 tax rates both went up slightly. They were capped at $250,000. Corporate tax rates, business tax rates went up 1%. Tax on gasoline went up 4 cents a gallon, and Social Security benefits were taxed for the first time. Raised taxes, the economy boomed. So raising taxes does not necessarily mean the economy will slump. Growth was over 3% a year in Clinton's term, and again, 20 million new jobs created during his presidency. Today's top tax rate today is slightly under 39%. Remember, in the 1940s and World War II, the top tax rate on the wealthy was 77%. So we are well under half of that. In Japan, the top tax rate today is 55%. In Scandinavia today, in many Scandinavian countries, this is tax on the wealthy upper income is 60%. So again, the inheritance tax today, if you inherit money, you can inherit something like $5 million without paying taxes on it. So our taxes are not exactly burdensome compared to what they used to be. The other thing he did domestically, and this is highly controversial even today, is NAFTA, North American Free Trade Association, between Canada, the United States, and Mexico. Clinton got a treaty, and basically we had cross-border free trade. No tariffs, no tax on imports between Canada, Mexico, and the United States. Liberal Democrats opposed this. Clinton pushed it through. Republicans were in favor of this. So Clinton is a middle-of-the-road guy. He takes from both ends, which is one reason why he was so successful. NAFTA today is still a problem. Critics at the time said, Ross Perot said, it's going to create a giant sucking sound going south. Jobs will go south. That did happen to some extent. Unskilled factory jobs moved to Mexico because now there were no import taxes, so they could send things back, manufactured in Mexico. The other negative effect of it was that agriculture in Mexico, which employed small farmers in Mexico, basically subsistence farmers, very small pieces of land, something like 5.5 million. 4 years after NAFTA was passed, it went down to about 3 million. So small farmers in Mexico were devastated. Why? Because American agribusiness, we can grow plant products, we can grow corn, wheat, maize, everything else, and animal products a whole lot cheaper than you can on small pieces of land in Mexico. And with no import taxes, it was all being sent, a lot of it was being sent south. So it absolutely decimated Mexican agriculture. Not all of it, but small farmers in Mexico. Direct result of that is that you have millions of unemployed people in Mexico who used to at least be able to survive on their small farms. And some of them moved north, not all of them. The other economic alternative to running a small farm was getting involved in the drug trade. So some very negative effects of NAFTA. It is still being debated today. Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton's wife, was put in charge of creating a national health care plan. Obviously way before its time. This is an early version of Obamacare, and it totally failed. She could not get it through Congress, and majority of the American public was opposed to it at the time. But Bill Clinton is also a kind of Teflon president. Things don't stick. Even when stupid things happen, he came out ahead of the deal. Republicans retook Congress, and he lost his majority in Congress in the midterm elections in 1994. So 6 of his 8 years of his presidency, he is working with a Republican Congress. They directly attacked Clinton. They shut down the U.S. government twice, trying to cut Medicare and Medicaid, but Congress got the blame and Clinton did not, because last year we also shut the government. Congress also got the blame for that. So Clinton is maneuvering a fine line between Republicans and liberal Democrats, pleasing neither of them, but getting enough done. In foreign affairs, Black Hawk Down again. We send troops to Somalia under a UN flag, not under our own flag, but as part of a UN mission. There's a huge famine in Somalia in 1993. 18 soldiers are killed. The Black Hawk helicopter goes down, and their bodies are dragged through the streets of Mogadishu. This is a huge slap in the face to America, of course. The reaction is we withdrew troops again. So America has a long history of pulling out of combat zones, starting with Vietnam. So again, in Syria, and again with the Kurds, we're leaving. So who depends on us? And this is the long-term result. Who is going to depend on the United States when we have a history of abandoning our allies? Clinton also sent troops to Haiti. Haiti is a perpetual disaster. The main reason he sent them there was to stop the flood of Haitian refugees coming to Florida, which didn't do much about it. His big event overseas was in Bosnia, Croatia, part of the former Yugoslavia, which had broken up at the end of the Soviet collapse. And in 1991, the minute the central government, propped up by the Soviets, pulled out, Bosnia slipped into a civil war. Bosnia has three different ethnic groups. It has Catholic Croatians, it has Eastern Orthodox Serbs there, and it has Muslim Bosnians. So, after 2 years, NATO moved in to try and protect the Muslims who were under direct attack, particularly by the Orthodox Serbs, and the United States did not send troops on the ground, but sent air attacks to help support NATO. And it came late. Sarajevo, which I have actually visited, is a tragic city. It was under siege for 2 years by the Serbians, and nobody could move. You couldn't move in the street because snipers lined the hills on both sides and would shoot anybody that they saw. The Dayton Accords under U.S. and Clinton pushing it finally created a peace. And we, at that point, sent in 20,000 United States troops as part of an international force to keep the peace. This is also a proxy war. This also involves the Cold War, because who is propping up and arming the Serbians? The Russians. Why Russia? Because Russia is also Eastern Orthodox and sees the Serbs as their little brothers. This is still an issue in that part of the world. This has not been settled. This goes on well into the late 1990s and is still not settled today. The government is very, very shaky in Bosnia today and divided between these three parties. Finally, UN and NATO troops basically were moved in and took over and pushed the Serbs back. But this was a slaughterhouse for about a year and a half. There were mass murders of Muslim boys and men in Croatia and in Bosnia. Clinton said after his presidency, the one thing I really regret was Bosnia not going in harder and faster. And we didn't. We came in late, and we came in under a UN flag. Okay, so with the next slide, 52, you'll recognize that woman, maybe not. Some of you might. That is Monica Lewinsky. And this is our second president who came up on impeachment charges. The first was Andrew Johnson after the Civil War, and Bill Clinton was the second. Bill Clinton came out of nowhere. He was governor of Arkansas, very, very young, one of the youngest governors in the country. Very brilliant guy. He was a Rhodes Scholar, came from a divorced mother's household, had no money whatsoever. He got where he did by being intellectually brilliant. Both he and Hillary are very, very smart people, very hardworking people. They read the footnotes, they read the position papers, they read all the government documents. Unfortunately, like many great men, and Bill Clinton is a mesmerizing speaker, had great charisma. His campaign slogan was, "I still believe in a place called Hope." He came from Hope, Arkansas. How great is that? And in the debates with George Bush, very famously, these were open debates, and the moderator at one point asked President Bush, Sr., can you tell me the price of, and I remember this, tell me the price of a pair of blue jeans, the price of a gallon of milk, the price of a pound of ground beef. Bush had no idea. He didn't know what a scanner was in a grocery store. He hadn't been shopping for groceries probably in 40 years. The moderator turned to Bill Clinton and asked him the same questions. Bill Clinton rattled off all three prices with no problem at all. And I turned to my husband. I said, he just won the election. Because people could relate to Bill Clinton. He knew what the average family lived like. He knew what people were struggling against. Unfortunately, like many great men, he had an Achilles heel, and Clinton's problem was women. Not a rare problem in American history. And the whole investigation began with an investigation not into affairs, but into a land deal, a development called Whitewater in Arkansas. The Clintons had invested in it. A year later, they had invested something like $1,000, and they made $100,000 profit. Show me a deal like that, and I'll invest in it too. Everybody would. Looked a little fishy. A lot of people hated the Clintons. A lot of people still hate the Clintons. What the investigation found was nothing illegal, not exactly up and up, not exactly the right thing to do. Yeah, they did get some kind of special deal, but there was nothing illegal. But the head of the investigation, a man named Ken Starr, kept investigating. And he begins to find out that there are a long series of shady women involved with Bill Clinton. He's known to basically chase women. Monica Lewinsky was his intern in the White House. And what went on there, we don't quite know, and I don't really care. But a friend of Monica's had taped her phone calls. Monica was talking to an older woman friend of hers, and the phone calls were taped. Ken Starr, the head of the investigating committee, gets hold of the tapes. They were leaked to the media. Monica Lewinsky comes in and testifies. Bill Clinton admits kind of what went on. And he says quite famously, "I did not have sex with that woman." And then we begin to investigate, well, what exactly does he mean? What exactly does sex mean? He indicates that he did not have sexual intercourse with that woman. What else happened, I don't even want to get into, but according to Clinton, it was not regular sex. Starr issues a 452-page report to Congress, highlighting the fact that Clinton lied under oath, whether he did or not. As Clinton famously said, it depends on what the definition of is. Okay. And lying under oath and detailed sexual charges. The public basically reacted by turning on Ken Starr in the committee. We don't want to know this stuff. We don't care about this stuff. Again, it's the economy, stupid. The economy was doing great in the 1990s. This is way over the top. As far as we know, Clinton did not rape anybody. This is consensual sex by all parties all the way back. On the other hand, Monica Lewinsky is an intern, and you are the president. These are not exactly equally powerful people, but there was no rape involved. As far as we know, there was no regular sex involved. Congress adopted 2 charges of impeachment, perjury, obstruction of justice. The Republican House sent it on to the Senate. Did not get a majority. He was not impeached. You need a 2/3 vote to impeach someone in the Senate. So Clinton was brought up on charges, but not impeached. So we have yet to impeach a president, but Trump is our 3rd brought up on impeachment charges. So Clinton serves for 2 terms, very successful, economy is doing great, and the 2000 election comes along. And this is one of the more interesting elections in American history. So I'm going to slide number 53. Al Gore, Clinton's vice president, is running against George Bush's son, George Bush Jr., and Gore kept his distance from Clinton. Clinton did not campaign very much for him because a lot of people didn't like the Clintons at all. And this should sound vaguely familiar. Gore won the popular vote. The Electoral College is tied, and the votes of Florida have yet to be counted. Florida at the time had 25 electoral votes. And the vote for Gore versus Bush was 267 to 246. So whoever got those Florida electoral votes would win the election. Florida, number one, this is another case where you have a third-party candidate nationally. This is Ralph Nader, the the Green Party, was running as a third-party candidate. He got something like 2% of the vote. If he had not won, then Al Gore clearly would have won because his votes would have gone to Gore. So this is another lesson from Teddy Roosevelt and the Bull Moose Party. Third parties take votes away from those that they are closest to. Strange things went on in Florida. If you look at the next slide, slide 54, that is a very famous factor in the Florida election. They used punch cards. It was not computerized voting. It was with punch cards, and you punched your candidates. You punched through the little holes. Some of the cards were not punched all the way completely through, and that's a guy looking at, with a magnifying glass, at hanging chads. The chads were the little pieces of paper that were supposed to be punched out. So they had to go back by hand and count millions of votes in Florida to try and determine who actually won. The Florida Supreme Court ordered a recount by hand, and they found all kinds of strange things going on in Florida. Number one, the ballots were very confusing. They were punch cards, which weren't always punched correctly. Black voters' names were removed from the rolls in a number of counties by the thousands. 5 weeks after the election, we still don't have a president. Nobody knows what's going on. Al Gore demands we're going to continue with the recount. And finally, the Supreme Court, which had 5 Republicans on it, stopped the Florida recount and gave the presidency to Bush. This was through the Supreme Court. At the point they stopped the recount, Bush was 500 votes ahead in one Florida county, which was run by strong Republican supporters. There were 6 million votes cast in Florida, and the vote came down to slightly under 500 votes before they started recounting. Supreme Court halts the recount. Al Gore does not fight it because at this point we're getting close to inauguration. We can't drag the country through this. How long will it take to count all of the 6 million votes? And he says, okay, I abdicate. I give it to Bush. So all kinds of strange things happen in Florida. The governor of Florida at the time was also George Bush's brother, Jeb Bush. The last slide on there, slide number 55, is very interesting because for the last 25, 30 years, and if you look at the next election in November, look up the results online. They'll probably show it all over television. You will see an identical map. This is a map from 2012. It was the same in 2000. It was the same in pretty much in 1990 as well. It's exactly the same today. These are by county. And you can see Democrat and Republican. You can see exactly where the votes are. We are no longer North versus South, not Democratic South, Republican North, or any other variation. It is strictly urban, rural. So if you want to find almost any urban area in the country, look for the blue little spaces. Everything else is Republican red. There are some exceptions. The Valley in Texas is Democratic. Parts of northern New Mexico and Arizona, because those are large Indian reservations, they are Democratic. But if you look at the blue areas, the two coasts, and every single urban area in the country is in blue on there. So we are completely split today as we were then. Not so much Democrat, Republican, but urban and rural. And Republicans now claim the rural vote and Democrats claim the urban vote. Pretty much the same New Deal coalition that Franklin Roosevelt claimed. Check out the next election results. They will be identical to this. And this is why it's important to fill out the census, because the census determines where the money goes for the next 10 years, which means for Texas, you are talking over $3 billion in the next 10 years. And it also will determine how voting districts are drawn. And that's a whole nother ball of wax. I'm not getting into that. Okay, so that is as far as I go. George Bush was elected. Shortly thereafter, we had 9/11, and we are back at war again, not with Russia so much, but with the Islamic State, the Taliban. And we have been in Afghanistan and later Iraq exactly for those reasons, and we are back at war, endless war again. Okay, so some things, just a few last words here. Democracy depends on an educated public. It is our job, yours and mine, to stay informed with reliable news sources and not fake news. Because when you vote, you have to be informed. History, this is why history is important, I think, because it helps inform us about politics, about government, about our nation. And vote. Nobody pays attention to young people because up till now, 75% of you haven't voted. My demographic, people over 50, we vote 85, 90%. Yeah, they're going to take care of it. I feel really bad for you guys. You are hitting a bad time in history. Our unemployment rate today is very close what it was in the Great Depression. My prediction will be we're not going to get out of this fast. We didn't get out of the Great Depression fast either. But we are in much better shape in many ways. For one thing, in the Great Depression, government didn't come in for a very long time and help the average person. There was nothing. You were completely on your own. You are not on your own today. The government has just sent most of us money and will continue to do so. Other things that I have learned, I'm not a Marxist. I don't believe all history is economic history, but follow the money. You want to find an answer? Follow the money. That will usually tell you what's going on. Get as much and as good an education as you can. If you can continue in graduate school, do it. Now is a great time to stay in school because the jobs are going to be screwed up for a long time to come. You question everything. This is what we learned from Vietnam and Richard Nixon. You question everyone. You question everything. You question teachers. You question me. You question ministers. You question the government. Absolutely. You question doctors. You question everybody. Questions never hurt anything because it's getting harder and harder with all of the news sources we have to determine what is true and what is not true. Good luck. Stay well. Stay healthy. I wish you, every single one of you, all the best. I am really, really, really deeply sorry that we couldn't have in class. This is a poor substitute for it. You did the best you could. I did the best I could. That's all we can do. We just move on from here. So I do wish you all the best. If you need something, contact me. You know how to contact me now. And stay healthy, stay well. Stay on your toes. Thanks, and good luck.